The morning I discovered my natural gas supply line was feeding the HOA clubhouse without my knowledge or consent was the same morning I decided enough was enough with the Paradise Springs Community Association. I had moved to Paradise Springs, Nevada, about 3 years ago after selling my tech startup in San Francisco. The gated community sat just outside Henderson, promising peace, luxury amenities, and a well-maintained neighborhood. What they forgot to mention in the glossy brochure was that the HOA president, a woman named Deborah Mitchell, treated the entire community like her personal fiefdom. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in January. I was having coffee in my home office when I noticed my natural gas bill had jumped from around $200 to nearly $800. My first thought was a leak. I immediately called the gas company and scheduled an emergency inspection. The technician, a weathered man named Marcus, arrived within 2 hours. He walked my property line with his detection equipment, checked all my appliances, and finally traced the issue to a secondary line that branched off from my main supply near the back corner of my lot. "This line here," Marcus said, pointing to a pipe that disappeared under the fence separating my property from the community clubhouse. "It's feeding something off your meter." "What do you mean feeding something?" I asked, already feeling my blood pressure rising. "Your gas meter is supplying 2 properties. Your house and whatever is on the other side of that fence has been for a while from the looks of these readings." I stared at the fence, then back at Marcus. "The clubhouse is back there." "Well, someone's been getting free heating on your dime then." After Marcus left, I immediately drove to the clubhouse. It was a sprawling single-story building with a full kitchen, meeting rooms, a gym, and a heated pool. The whole structure sat maybe 50 feet from my back fence line. I had always assumed the building had its own utilities. Why would I think otherwise? Inside, I found Sheila, the clubhouse manager, restocking towels in the gym area. "Sheila, quick question. Where does the gas for this building come from?" She looked up, confused by my directness. "The gas, I have no idea. Utilities are handled by the HOA board." "Why?" "Because apparently it's been coming from my house for God knows how long." Her eyes widened. "That can't be right." "Yeah, well, I just had the gas company confirm it. I need to see Deborah immediately." Sheila pulled out her phone and made a call. 5 minutes later, she hung up with an apologetic expression. "She says she's busy today but can meet with you at next week's board meeting." "Next week?" "Sheila, I'm not paying to heat this entire building. I need this resolved today." "I understand, but I don't have any authority over utility arrangements. You'll have to take it up with the board." I left the clubhouse frustrated but not defeated. Back home, I pulled out my HOA documents, my property deed, and every piece of paperwork related to my house purchase. I spent the next 4 hours combing through everything. Nowhere was there any mention of my property supplying gas to common areas. The deed clearly showed my lot boundaries, and the clubhouse was definitely not within them. The next morning, I called my real estate attorney, Neil Andrews. Yes, same last name but no relation. He had helped me with the house purchase and several business deals over the years. "Neil, I need you to look into something bizarre," I said, explaining the situation. He listened quietly, then let out a low whistle. "That's theft of services at minimum." "Do you have documentation from the gas company?" "Getting it sent over today." "Good. Forward it to me. I'll draft a letter to the HOA. They'll need to reimburse you for however long this has been going on and establish their own gas service immediately." "How long do you think that'll take?" "The letter. I can have it done by end of business today." "Their response?" "They have 10 business days to reply formally, but they really should address this immediately given the nature of the issue." I thanked Neil and hung up, feeling slightly better about having legal counsel involved. But the satisfaction was short-lived. That afternoon, I received an email from Deborah Mitchell. "Mr. Noah Ashford," it began, using my full name like a schoolteacher addressing a misbehaving student. "It has come to my attention that you are making accusations regarding the clubhouse utilities. I want to assure you that all utility arrangements in Paradise Springs are in full compliance with community standards and regulations. The gas line in question was installed during the original development and has been grandfathered into the current community structure. As a homeowner in Paradise Springs, you agreed to support community amenities when you purchased your property. I will see you at next week's board meeting where we can discuss your concerns in the appropriate forum." I read the email 3 times, my anger growing with each pass. Grandfathered in. Support community amenities. This was textbook gaslighting and deflection. I called Neil back immediately and read him the email. "Yeah, that's complete nonsense," he said flatly. "There's no such thing as being grandfathered into using someone else's utilities without their knowledge or an easement. And if there was an easement, it would have been disclosed at purchase. She's hoping you'll just accept this and move on." "I'm not accepting anything." "Good. I'm escalating the letter to a formal legal demand. I'll include a timeline for reimbursement and disconnection. If they don't comply, we'll file suit. Do it." The letter went out via certified mail the next day. I also made copies and hand-delivered one to the HOA office, making sure the receptionist stamped my copy with the date and time received. For 2 days, I heard nothing. Then on Friday evening, Deborah showed up at my front door. She was exactly what you would picture. Middle-aged, expensive blonde highlights, designer activewear that had never seen actual exercise, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Noah, hi. I thought we should chat neighbor to neighbor before this gets out of hand." I didn't invite her in. "It's already out of hand, Deborah. You've been stealing my gas." Her smile tightened. "That's a harsh word. This is really just an administrative oversight. The previous homeowner never complained." "Did the previous homeowner know?" She waved her hand dismissively. "The point is, we can work this out amicably. The HOA is prepared to offer you a credit toward your HOA dues for the next 6 months. "How much?" $500. I almost laughed. My last gas bill was $800 for 1 month, and this has apparently been going on for years. "Well, I'm sure that's an anomaly. It's been a cold winter." "Deborah, I'm not negotiating. You need to establish your own gas service and reimburse me for every penny this has cost me since I bought this house." Her pleasant facade cracked. "You're being unreasonable. The community needs that clubhouse heated. We have residents who use it daily. Senior citizens depend on that heated pool for their physical therapy. Then the community can pay for its own utilities like everyone else." "Watch your tone," she snapped. "I don't appreciate being spoken to like this. I'm an elected official in this community. And I'm a homeowner who's been systematically robbed. My attorney has already sent you a formal demand. You have until the deadline to respond appropriately." She stood there for a moment, clearly unused to people standing up to her. "You're making a big mistake. This community has rules and standards. People who don't want to be team players tend to find living here very uncomfortable." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. You should think carefully about how you want to proceed." She turned and walked back to her Mercedes, which she had parked blocking my driveway. I immediately went inside and sent Neil an email documenting the entire conversation. He responded within minutes. "Document everything. She's already making this worse for herself." The weekend passed quietly, but Monday brought a new development. I went out to get my mail and found a violation notice stuck to my front door. According to the notice, My lawn had weeds exceeding the 2-inch height limit. My house numbers were not the approved font and size, and my garage door had a small dent that violated the community's aesthetic standards. I walked around my property slowly. My lawn was immaculate. I paid a landscaping service $200 a month to keep it perfect. There were no weeds. My house numbers were the same ones that came with the house when I bought it. And yes, my garage door had a tiny dent from when I accidentally bumped it with my car door a year ago, but it was barely visible and had never been an issue before. The violations were completely fabricated, obvious retaliation for my gas dispute. Each violation came with a $50 fine, totaling $150, with the threat of daily additional fines if not corrected within 5 business days. I took extensive photos of everything, noting the date and time. Then I called Neil again. "She's retaliating," I told him. "Fake violations." "Perfect," Neil said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "She's creating a clear pattern of harassment. Keep those notices. Document everything. Take time-stamped photos. This actually helps our case significantly." "It doesn't feel helpful." "It feels like being harassed." "I know, and I'm sorry you're dealing with this. But legally, she's digging herself into a hole. HOA board members have a fiduciary duty to act in the community's best interest, not to retaliate against homeowners. She's violating that duty in a very obvious way." Tuesday brought another development. I received a formal notice that the next board meeting had been rescheduled to discuss utility concerns and community standards violations. The meeting was set for Thursday evening. I confirmed with Neil that he could attend with me. "Wouldn't miss it," he said. Wednesday afternoon, I decided to do some investigating. I drove to the Henderson City Clerk's office and requested all permits and utility records for the Paradise Springs Clubhouse. It took a few hours, but the clerk eventually provided me with copies of everything on file. What I found was enlightening. The clubhouse had been built 12 years ago during the community's development phase. The original permits showed plans for a dedicated gas line from the street. But there was an amendment filed 6 months into construction, signed by the developer and the utility company, routing the gas service through what would become my property instead. The amendment cited cost savings and efficiency. The problem was clear. This arrangement might have been fine when the developer owned all the land, but once my lot was sold to a private owner, the situation should have changed. At minimum, it should have been disclosed. The fact that it wasn't suggested either gross incompetence or deliberate concealment. I made copies of everything and sent them to Neil immediately. Thursday evening arrived cold and clear. I dressed in business casual and met Neil in the parking lot of the community center where the board meeting was held. He carried a leather briefcase stuffed with documents. "Ready?" he asked. "Let's get this over with." The meeting room was set up like a small courtroom, with the 5 board members sitting at a long table facing rows of chairs for residents. About 30 people were scattered throughout the audience, more than usual. Word had clearly spread about the drama. Deborah sat in the center of the board table, flanked by 2 men and 2 women I vaguely recognized from community events. She looked supremely confident, which worried me. The meeting began with standard business: minutes approval, treasurer's report, landscaping committee updates. Finally, 45 minutes in, Deborah cleared her throat. "We now move to new business. We have a situation with homeowner Noah Ashford regarding utility arrangements and several community standards violations. Mr. Ashford, would you like to address the board?" Neil and I stood and walked to the small podium facing the board. "Thank you," Neil began. "I'm Neil Andrews, representing Mr. Ashford. We're here tonight because the HOA has been illegally using my client's natural gas service to heat the community clubhouse without his knowledge or consent. This has been occurring for approximately 3 years, costing Mr. Ashford thousands of dollars. Deborah interrupted. As I explained to Mr. Ashford, this arrangement has been in place since the community was developed. It's a standard utility easement. Actually, Neil said, pulling out documents, there is no easement. I've reviewed the deed, the title insurance, and every document associated with the property purchase. No easement exists. What does exist is a utility routing decision made by the developer 12 years ago that was never properly disclosed or transferred when the lots were sold. He laid out copies of the permits and routing amendments on the table. One of the other board members, a man named Richard, picked them up and started reading. Furthermore, Neil continued, when my client brought this issue to your attention, instead of working to resolve it, you retaliated with fabricated community standards violations. We have photographic evidence that the violations cited are either non-existent or were never previously enforced. Deborah's face reddened. Those violations were reported by concerned neighbors and investigated by our management company. Then I'm sure you have documentation of those reports and investigations. We'd like copies, please. There was a pause. Deborah looked at her fellow board members, then back at Neil. That's confidential HOA business. Actually, under Nevada law, violation reports and their investigations are not confidential. Homeowners have a right to review any complaints or violations filed against them. We're formally requesting those records tonight. Another board member, a woman named Patricia, spoke up. I'm confused. Are we saying the clubhouse has been using Noah's gas this whole time? How is that even possible? Richard, still looking at the documents, answered her. According to these permits, the gas line was routed through his lot during construction. It looks like it was supposed to be temporary, but then became permanent. Without proper disclosure, Neil added, which means the HOA has been knowingly benefiting from my client's utility service without compensation or agreement. Deborah tried to regain control. This is all very technical. I suggest we table this matter and have our attorney review everything. You're welcome to have your attorney review it, Neil said, but the facts are simple. The gas service must be disconnected from my client's meter, and the HOA must establish its own service. Additionally, Mr. Ashford is entitled to reimbursement for the past 3 years of unauthorized usage. We've calculated the amount at approximately $23,000. The audience murmured. 23,000 was a significant number. That's outrageous, Deborah snapped. We're not paying that. Then we'll see you in court, Neil said calmly. Additionally, we'll be filing complaints with the Nevada Real Estate Division regarding HOA board member misconduct, specifically retaliation against a homeowner for raising legitimate concerns. I watched Deborah's confidence crack. She looked at her fellow board members, clearly expecting support, but they were all studying the documents Neil had provided. Richard finally spoke. Deborah, if what he's saying is accurate, we have a serious problem. We can't use another homeowner's utilities without permission. That's not just an HOA issue, that's potentially criminal. It's not criminal, Deborah insisted. It's a civil matter at most. Actually, Neil said, unauthorized use of utility services can be prosecuted as theft under Nevada Revised Statutes 205.0832. It's usually a misdemeanor, but can be elevated to a felony depending on the value. The room went silent. I could see the calculation happening in everyone's minds. $23,000 was felony territory. Patricia spoke next. I move that we accept Mr. Ashford's demands and work with him to resolve this matter immediately." "I second," Richard said. "Wait," Deborah said. "We need to consult with our attorney first." "No," Patricia said firmly. "We need to stop digging this hole deeper." All in favor of accepting Mr. Ashford's terms and working toward immediate resolution, 4 hands went up. Deborah's remained down, but she was outvoted. "Fine," she said coldly. "But I want it on record that I believe we're being strong-armed here." "Noted," Patricia said. "Mr. Ashford, Mr. Andrews, we apologize for this situation. We'll work with you to get this resolved as quickly as possible." Neil nodded. "We'll need several things. First, a written agreement acknowledging the unauthorized use and agreeing to reimbursement. Second, the HOA will need to contract with the gas company to establish its own service within 30 days. Third, all retaliatory violations against Mr. Ashford need to be withdrawn and expunged from his record. And fourth, we'll need those violation reports and investigation documents." "Agreed," Patricia said. "We'll have our management company prepare everything." The meeting adjourned shortly after. As people filed out, several neighbors approached me to express support. Apparently, Deborah's iron-fisted management style had made her unpopular with more than just me. One older gentleman named Frank shook my hand vigorously. "Good for you, standing up to her. She's been running this place like a dictator for too long." A woman named Susan added, "She tried to fine me $500 last year because my Christmas lights were up 2 days past the deadline." 2 days. The stories kept coming. Deborah had apparently been abusing her position for years, but no one had pushed back hard enough to make it stick. As Neil and I walked to our cars, he said, "That went better than expected. Usually, these things take months." "Think they'll actually follow through, with 4 of the 5 board members voting for it?" "Yes. Deborah might drag her feet, but she's outnumbered now." Over the next week, things moved quickly. The HOA's management company called me to schedule a meeting with their attorney. We met at their office on the following Tuesday. The attorney, a tired-looking woman named Jennifer Russo, laid out a proposed settlement agreement. The HOA would pay me $23,000 in 3 installments over 60 days. They would establish their own gas service within 30 days and disconnect from my line. All violations would be withdrawn and my record cleared. Additionally, there would be a clause preventing any retaliation or targeted enforcement against me for the next 5 years. "What about the disconnection timeline?" Neil asked. "What happens if the gas company can't get them set up within 30 days? Jennifer looked uncomfortable. "We've been told it could take up to 45 days. "Then the agreement should reflect that Mr. Ashford will not be responsible for any gas usage beyond 30 days from signing. If it takes 45 days to complete the switch, the HOA is responsible for that additional 15 days. "That's fine," Jennifer said, making a note. We signed the agreement that afternoon. The first installment of the payment, $7,700, would be paid within 10 days. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days after signing the agreement, I came home to find my front gate hanging open and my backyard torn up. Someone had been digging near the gas line. I immediately called the police and the gas company. The responding officer, a young cop named Martinez, took a report while we waited for the gas company to arrive. Marcus, the same technician from before, showed up and inspected the damage. "Someone tried to cap off this line," he said, pointing to the exposed pipe. "But they didn't do it right. If you had used your gas tonight, it could have caused a major leak or even an explosion." My blood ran cold. Who would do this? No idea, but whoever it was doesn't know what they're doing. This is incredibly dangerous. Officer Martinez took more photos and notes. "Has anyone threatened you recently?" I told him about the HOA situation, the settlement, and Deborah's clear animosity toward me. "I'll need to talk to her," he said. "Do you have her contact information?" I provided everything. The gas company secured the line and made it safe, but my yard was a mess, and I was thoroughly shaken. Someone had tried to take matters into their own hands, potentially putting my life at risk. The next day, Neil filed an emergency motion documenting the incident and requesting immediate disconnection of the clubhouse from my gas supply, regardless of whether the HOA had its own service established. The judge granted it within hours. That afternoon, Marcus and a full crew arrived to permanently cap my line at the property boundary. The clubhouse would be without gas until the HOA got its own service connected. Deborah called me that evening, furious. "You've shut off heat to the clubhouse. We have seniors who need that heated pool for therapy." "Someone tried to sabotage my gas line," I said flatly. "The police are investigating. That has nothing to do with the clubhouse. It has everything to do with it. A judge ordered the disconnection for safety reasons. If you need heat, I suggest you expedite your gas service installation. This is unconscionable. You're punishing the entire community." "I'm protecting my property and my safety. The agreement gave you 30 days to establish service. Use portable heaters until then." She hung up on me. I immediately sent Neil a text documenting the call. Over the next few days, the police investigation progressed. Officer Martinez called me with an update on Friday afternoon. "We've reviewed security footage from your neighbors and some interesting things came up," he said. "We can see a white SUV pulling up to your house the night of the incident. The plates are registered to Deborah Mitchell." My heart raced. She did it herself. We don't know who actually did the digging, but her vehicle was there. We're bringing her in for questioning. That evening, I got a call from Patricia, the board member who had supported me at the meeting. "Noah, I wanted to give you a heads up. Deborah has been arrested. She apparently confessed to hiring someone to cap off your gas line. She thought she was helping the community by forcing the reconnection on her terms." "That's insane." "I know. The board held an emergency meeting an hour ago. We've removed her as president and from the board entirely. I'm so sorry this happened. None of us knew she would go this far." "Who did she hire?" "Her nephew. He's some kind of handyman but clearly doesn't know anything about gas lines. He's been arrested too." I sat down heavily. This had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. A simple utility dispute had turned into criminal charges. The next week was a blur of police statements, legal paperwork, and neighborhood gossip. The HOA brought in portable heaters for the clubhouse, and several residents organized a petition supporting me and condemning Deborah's actions. The gas company fast-tracked the clubhouse's independent service connection, completing it in 3 weeks instead of the projected 45 days. The HOA made their first payment to me on time. The second and third followed like clockwork. Deborah and her nephew were both charged with criminal mischief and reckless endangerment. Deborah's attorney negotiated a plea deal: probation, community service, and restitution for the damage to my yard. She also quietly moved out of Paradise Springs within 2 months. Patricia took over as interim HOA president and immediately implemented new policies requiring board transparency, regular audits, and protections against retaliation. She reached out to other homeowners who had been unfairly targeted by Deborah and worked to make things right. The heated pool reopened with its new gas service, and life in Paradise Springs slowly returned to normal. Several neighbors who had previously been too intimidated to participate in community affairs started attending board meetings. The culture began to shift from fear-based compliance to actual community cooperation. 6 months after everything began, I was working in my home office when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Frank, the elderly gentleman who had supported me at the board meeting, standing with a bottle of wine. "Wanted to thank you properly," he said. "A bunch of us old-timers were talking. You standing up to Deborah gave the rest of us courage to speak up. The HOA is actually pleasant now. Patricia's doing a great job." I invited him in, and we talked for an hour about the changes in Paradise Springs. He told me stories of Deborah's petty tyrannies over the years. Fines for children's toys left in yards overnight, harassment over the wrong shade of beige paint, threats of lawsuits over minor infractions. "Power corrupts," Frank said simply. "Give someone like her a little authority and they think they're running an empire. But you showed everyone she wasn't untouchable. That mattered." After he left, I sat on my back patio and looked at the repaired fence line where the gas pipe had once connected to the clubhouse. My yard had been professionally landscaped to cover the damage, and you could barely tell anything had happened. The whole experience had taught me something important about standing up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. The easy path would have been to accept Deborah's minimal offer, pay the inflated bills, and hope the problem eventually went away. But easy rarely means right. I had also learned about community dynamics. Deborah had maintained power not through actual authority, but through intimidation and the assumption that no one would challenge her. Once someone finally did, her whole house of cards collapsed. Other homeowners had been waiting for someone to take that first step. The legal bills had been substantial, even though I ultimately recovered them as part of the settlement. The stress had taken a toll. But I had my property rights back. I wasn't paying to heat a building I didn't use, and I had helped create positive change in my community. A month later, I attended an HOA board meeting for the first time since the confrontation. The atmosphere was completely different. Patricia ran an efficient, transparent meeting. Residents asked questions without fear. Decisions were made collaboratively rather than by decree. During the open forum section, a new homeowner named Jessica raised her hand. "I've been here 3 months and I'm already confused about some of the architectural guidelines. They seem contradictory." Instead of dismissing her, Patricia nodded. "You're right. Those guidelines were written 15 years ago and never updated. Let's form a committee to review and modernize them. Who wants to help?" 5 hands went up, including mine. This was how an HOA should function, serving the community rather than ruling it. Over the following months, I became more involved in community affairs. The Architectural Guidelines Committee met weekly, and we streamlined outdated rules, removed contradictory requirements, and added clearer processes for requesting variances. It was surprisingly satisfying work. I also joined the Finance Committee after Patricia mentioned they needed someone with business experience. We audited the HOA's books and found several irregularities from Deborah's tenure. Nothing criminal, but plenty of wasteful spending and sweetheart deals with vendors. We cleaned it up, went out for competitive bids on contracts, and reduced HOA fees by 15% within 6 months. The clubhouse became a genuine community asset rather than a symbol of Deborah's control. New activities started: yoga classes, book clubs, children's programs. The heated pool, now properly paid for by HOA dues, was used more than ever. One evening, I was at the clubhouse gym when an older woman approached me. I recognized her as Sarah, someone who had lived in Paradise Springs for over a decade. "You probably don't remember me," she said, "but I wanted to thank you. My daughter visits with her kids every summer. Last year, Deborah fined me $300 because the kids left pool toys on my lawn. This year, we've had the best summer ever without that hanging over us. The kids can actually be kids. Stories like that made everything worthwhile. I hadn't set out to be a community hero. I had just wanted to not pay for gas I wasn't using. But sometimes doing the right thing for yourself ends up helping others too. The criminal case against Deborah and her nephew concluded with both accepting plea deals. Her nephew got community service and probation. Deborah received a stiffer sentence due to her position of authority and the premeditated nature of her actions. 1 year of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in Nevada. She also had to pay restitution for my yard damage and legal fees related to the criminal investigation. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing. Neil went on my behalf and reported that Deborah showed no remorse, maintaining she had been protecting the community. Some people never learn. By the time the first anniversary of my gas bill discovery rolled around, Paradise Springs had transformed. The community newsletter, once full of violation notices and scolding reminders, now featured neighbor spotlights, upcoming events, and genuine community news. Children played in yards without their parents worrying about toy placement violations. People painted their houses reasonable colors without fear of arbitrary rejection. Patricia decided not to run for another term as president, saying she had restored order and it was time for fresh perspectives. I considered running but ultimately declined. I had done my part. Others could take it from here. A retired teacher named Robert won the election and continued Patricia's collaborative approach. The whole experience changed how I viewed homeowner associations. They're not inherently bad. They serve important functions, maintaining common areas, ensuring basic standards, managing shared amenities. The problem comes when the wrong people get power and abuse it without accountability. I also learned about Nevada HOA law far more than I ever wanted to know. The state has decent protections for homeowners, but you have to be willing to enforce your rights. HOAs count on homeowners not knowing the law or being too intimidated to challenge them. Knowledge and persistence are your best weapons. My relationship with my neighbors deepened through the whole ordeal. Previously, I had been friendly but distant. Now I knew dozens of residents by name. We helped each other with projects, borrowed tools, watched each other's houses during vacations. Paradise Springs became an actual community instead of just a collection of houses with shared amenities. The gas line situation itself became something of a legend in the neighborhood. New homeowners would hear the story and express shock that something like that could happen. Longtime residents would shake their heads and talk about the bad old days under Deborah's rule. I became known as the guy who stood up to the HOA and won, which was alternately flattering and embarrassing. My own gas bills returned to normal, hovering around $200 monthly. Every time I paid it, I felt a small sense of satisfaction knowing I was only paying for what I actually used. The $23,000 reimbursement went into my investment account. It felt like found money, even though I had earned every penny of it through stress and hassle. Neil and I remained friends beyond the attorney-client relationship. We played golf occasionally, and he introduced me to his poker group. He told me the HOA case had become a teaching example at his firm for dealing with difficult opponents who think they are immune to consequences. Deborah's biggest mistake, he explained over drinks one evening, was thinking her position made her untouchable. She forgot she was a volunteer administrator, not a dictator. The second she retaliated against you, she lost. Everything after that was just details. She seemed so confident, though, I said. Even at that board meeting, she really believed she was right. That's the danger of echo chambers. She surrounded herself with yes people and spent years getting her way. She genuinely couldn't comprehend someone successfully challenging her authority. Looking back, I could see the pattern. Deborah hadn't suddenly become tyrannical when I challenged her. She had been that way all along. I was just the first person with the resources and determination to fight back properly. Plenty of other homeowners had wanted to stand up to her, but lacked the money for attorneys or the energy for a prolonged battle. That realization made me grateful for my situation. I had sold a successful business. I could afford good legal representation. I worked from home, so I had flexibility to attend meetings and deal with the situation. Not everyone has those advantages. How many people had been taken advantage of by Deborah simply because they couldn't afford to fight? That question led me to reach out to Nevada Legal Services, a nonprofit providing free legal help. I made a substantial donation and specifically earmarked it for HOA disputes. If my experience could help someone else stand up to abuse, the whole mess would have additional meaning. The donation caught the attention of a local newspaper reporter who wrote an article about HOA abuses and reform efforts. I gave an interview, sharing my story without naming Deborah directly. The article generated significant discussion in Henderson and surrounding areas. Several other homeowners reached out with their own HOA horror stories. That led to me joining a local advocacy group focused on HOA reform legislation. We met monthly to discuss problem patterns and potential solutions. The group included homeowners, attorneys, and even some HOA board members who wanted better oversight and accountability. Through the group, I learned my situation wasn't unusual. HOAs across Nevada regularly overstepped their authority, banking on homeowner ignorance and reluctance to fight back. We started documenting cases and working with state legislators on reform bills. It was satisfying work, but sometimes depressing. For every case like mine that ended well, there were dozens where homeowners lost their homes over minor violations, faced crushing legal fees, or simply gave up and moved away. The power imbalance was real and systemic. One case particularly stuck with me: an elderly veteran on a fixed income who faced foreclosure over $3,000 in disputed fines. His HOA claimed his lawn was consistently out of compliance, but his neighbors testified that wasn't true. The HOA just wanted to force him out because his house was older and they wanted to redevelop the property. We helped connect him with pro bono legal help and eventually got the foreclosure stopped, but he aged 10 years during the process. These experiences reinforced my belief that sunshine is the best disinfectant. HOAs need transparency, regular audits, and clear appeal processes. Board members need to understand they serve the community, not rule it, and homeowners need to know their rights and be willing to exercise them. Paradise Springs became a model under the new leadership. The board published detailed meeting minutes online within 48 hours. Financial statements were available to any homeowner on request. A formal appeals process was established for violations, including the option for third-party mediation. Board meetings were recorded and archived. The changes weren't universally popular. A few residents preferred the old system where the board made decisions without input. One guy at a meeting complained that all the transparency and process was inefficient, and we should just trust the board to handle things. He was roundly shouted down by residents who remembered the Deborah era. My own property became something of a landmark for new homeowners touring the neighborhood. Real estate agents would drive by and mention that's where the big HOA scandal happened. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but it certainly made my house memorable. 2 years after the initial gas bill discovery, I sat in my backyard on a warm Nevada evening, looking at the repaired fence line. The clubhouse was hosting a community barbecue, and I could hear music and laughter drifting over. The heated pool was full of kids, properly heated with the clubhouse's own gas service. My yard looked better than ever after the professional landscaping. My gas bills were normal. My HOA was functional and responsive. The whole nightmare had resolved into something positive. I thought about the path not taken. What if I had just paid those inflated gas bills? What if I had accepted Deborah's insulting $500 offer? What if I had been too intimidated to fight back? The answer was clear. I would be thousands of dollars poorer. Deborah would still be terrorizing homeowners. The community would still be dysfunctional. Sometimes the hard path is the necessary one. My phone buzzed with a text from Frank, the elderly neighbor who had brought me wine. "You coming to the barbecue? They're grilling your steaks wrong and you need to supervise." I smiled and texted back that I would be there shortly. I grabbed a beer from my fridge and walked toward the sounds of community, toward the clubhouse that I no longer heated, toward neighbors who had become friends. The whole experience had taught me that fighting back against abuse isn't just about winning. It's about setting a precedent, showing others it can be done, and creating a better environment for everyone. One person standing up can change an entire community's trajectory. As I entered the barbecue area, Patricia waved me over. "Noah, perfect timing. We're planning a community garden and need your input on the budget." I joined the discussion, surrounded by neighbors who were genuinely working together to improve our shared space. This was what an HOA should be. People collaborating to make their community better, not a tyrant extracting tribute and wielding power. The gas line that had caused so much trouble was now just an underground pipe, properly capped and forgotten. But the changes it had sparked continued rippling through Paradise Springs. Deborah was gone. Transparency had replaced secrecy. Collaboration had replaced intimidation. The community had healed. Looking around at my neighbors laughing and planning projects together, I realized something important. I hadn't just solved a utility billing problem. I had helped reclaim a community from someone who had forgotten that power comes with responsibility. That leaders serve, they don't rule. That even the smallest homeowner has rights that matter. The steaks really were being grilled wrong, so I politely offered suggestions. Frank rolled his eyes good-naturedly and handed me the tongs. The community garden discussion continued around me, full of enthusiasm and genuine care for our shared space. As the sun set over Paradise Springs, turning the Nevada sky brilliant shades of orange and pink, I reflected on an unexpected truth. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is also the best thing for everyone around you. Standing up to Deborah had been about my rights and my money, but the benefits had extended far beyond my property line. The music played, the children swam, and the community came together in a way that would have been impossible under the old regime. My gas line only heated my house now, exactly as it should, and Paradise Springs had finally lived up to its name.